The sky above the Citadel of Aethelgard was not blue. It was a bruised purple, thick with the residual mana storms that had torn through the city's ley lines just hours ago. I stood on the edge of the crumbling parapet, my feet dangling over a drop that would turn a normal man into a smear on the rocks below. In my hand, I clutched the shattered remains of Alara's star pendant. The gold was twisted, the sapphire split down the middle, bleeding light instead of tears.
You can't leave it like this.
His voice rough from disuse and shouting. He stepped closer, boots scuffing the loose gravel of the walkway. The energy is leaking into the soil. If it touches the root systems of the elder trees, the entire western district will wither before dawn. I am not responsible for the trees, I replied, keeping my eyes on the fracture in the gem. The light pulsed rhythmically, a heartbeat made of arcane fury. It burned my palm, searing the skin but refusing to let go. I am responsible for surviving it. Surviving requires control, Thaddeus, not panic. He reached out, his fingers hovering inches from the glowing shard. Give it to me. I can stabilize the flow with a simple containment ward. We have time to fix this before the council arrives. The council doesn't care about fixing anything, I snapped, pulling my hand back. The light flared, casting long, jagged shadows across his face. They looked like claws. They care about consequences. And the consequence here is me being the scapegoat for your experimental failures. I'm not cleaning up your mess. You don't understand what this artifact is. He grabbed my wrist, his grip tight. His eyes were wide, desperate. It's a key. If it shatters completely, the barrier falls. Do you want to be responsible for the invasion? For the deaths that follow? Then stop experimenting with things you don't understand, I said, wrenching my arm free. The sudden movement caused the shard to slip from my fingers. It tumbled toward the abyss. Watch it fall. No. Thaddeus lunged forward, but his foot slipped on the loose stone. He scrambled for purchase, claws scraping against rock, but gravity was patient and merciless. I watched him fall, arms windmilling, mouth open in a silent scream. The shard followed him, a tiny star descending into the dark. The impact was not loud. It was a sudden silence that sucked the air from my lungs. The light vanished. The purple sky cracked like glass. And then I woke up. 3 days earlier, I opened my eyes to the smell of damp straw and rotting wood. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic pain, the kind that comes from hitting your forehead against a stone floor. Or in this case, being dragged out of the academy by 2 burly guards who smelled of stale ale and arrogance. I sat up slowly, wincing as my muscles protested. I was in a shack. A real shack, with walls made of splintered planks and a roof that leaked steady drips onto the dirt floor. There was no magic here. No hum of ley lines, no shimmering air, no comforting presence of mana. Just silence, heavy, suffocating silence. I looked down at my hands. They were thin, pale, trembling. These were not the hands of a mage. Mages had calluses from gripping staves, burn marks from failed incantations, veins that glowed faintly with internal power. My hands were soft, weak. I was Thaddeus Vale, and I had been exiled. A sharp pain spiked in my chest, followed by a chime in my mind. It wasn't external. It was inside, resonating against my skull. Status activated name: Thaddeus Vale, Mage rank, 0th, unranked magic potential, negligible affinity, unknown lifespan, 10 years chances of becoming a fully ranked mage, nearly impossible expected. Death event? Natural or accidental, in 10 years due to severe magical exhaustion. I stared at the floating text, translucent and cold against my vision. It was a game interface. I knew this because I had spent the last 20 years of my previous life as Thaddeus Vale, or rather, the man who would become him, grinding levels in Etheria Online. I was a gamer. A dedicated MMO player who spent his days dreaming about magic, never expecting to achieve it in reality. And now, here I was, but this wasn't a game. In a game, I could reset. I could respawn. Here, the stats were permanent, and the penalty for failure was death. Real death. I am a zeroth, I whispered. The words felt strange in my mouth. In Etheria, a zeroth was a level 1 character with bad RNG. You played them to teach yourself the mechanics before moving on to higher stakes. But here, a zeroth was a mistake, an error in the code of reality. I looked around the shack again. It was sparse. A cot, a table, a chair. And on the table, something that didn't belong. It was a pendant, star-shaped, made of silver but cracked down the center. The left half glowed with a faint, steady light. The right half was dark, dead metal. This was Alara's star pendant. Given to me by my mentor, the only person who had ever looked at me and seen potential instead of pity. I traced the jagged fissure that split the gemstone down the middle, feeling the rough edge where the metal had sheared under some immense pressure. It wasn't just broken, it was silenced. Or so I thought. As my thumb brushed over the dark half, a sudden warmth pulsed through the stone, and the left side flared with an intensity that made me wince.
It's not dead.
His breath hitching in his throat, he pulled his hand back as if burned, staring at the artifact with a mixture of horror and fascination. Alara said it would protect me. She said it was an anchor for my soul. My eyes were wide, pupils dilated so far they swallowed the irises. There was no magic in this room. The air was stale, smelling of mildew and old sweat, and yet the light from the stone cast long, dancing shadows on the rotting wall behind it. You are speaking to yourself now, I said aloud, testing the weight of the words. How pathetic. I gripped the edges of the table, my knuckles turning white. The pain in my chest had returned, a dull ache that felt like something was eating me from the inside out. I coughed, covering my mouth with the back of my hand. When I pulled it away, there was nothing there, but the sensation lingered. A hollowing, a draining. Show me. I focused inward, pushing against the barrier between my mind and the world. It felt like trying to push open a door that had been welded shut. But then the interface appeared, floating in the periphery of my vision, translucent and indifferent. Incoming event chain, Magic Revolt in 5 years. Incoming event chain, Mage's Coven Conspiracy in 10 years. Incoming event chain, The Great Convergence of Magic in 20 years. The text scrolled past my eyes, each line a hammer, blow to my composure. 5 years, 10, 20. A countdown to events that would shake the foundations of reality, and I was standing in a shack with 10 years left on the clock. Before we get into the story, do me a quick favor. Like this video, subscribe, and comment what story you want to see next. Now, let's begin. I have no time, I said, shaking my head. No time to die in obscurity. I stood up, my legs trembling under the weight of my own body. The shack felt smaller than it had before, the walls closing in like the jaws of a beast. I needed air. I needed to see if the world outside was still there, or if I had simply imagined the last 5 years of my life as a prelude to this moment of total defeat. I stumbled toward the door, grabbing the rusted handle. It groaned in protest, the metal stiff with disuse. With a grunt of effort, I pulled it open and stepped out into the night. The cold hit me first. It was sharp, biting through the thin fabric of my tunic. The sky above was not the blue of Earth, nor the purple of the Citadel's final hours. It was black, ink-like, dotted with stars that seemed too bright, too close. They pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, mirroring the pulse of the pendant in my pocket. "Look at you," a voice sneered from the shadows of the alleyway beside the shack. "Exiled trash, sleeping in the dirt." I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. A figure stepped out of the darkness, cloaked in tattered robes that hung loosely on a gaunt frame. His face was hidden beneath a hood, but his eyes gleamed with malicious intent. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "A friend," the man said, taking a step closer, "or at least, someone who sees potential where others see none." "I have no potential," I replied. "I am zeroth. My magic is gone." The man laughed, a dry, rasping sound that echoed off the brick walls. Magic is not gone, boy. It is merely dormant. Like the fire in wet wood, you just need the right spark to ignite it. He reached into his robe and pulled out a small vial filled with a swirling green liquid. He held it up to the light of the stars. The mage's coven has eyes everywhere, he continued, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. They watch the weak. They prune the garden. But they miss the weeds that grow in the cracks. You are a weed, Thaddeus Vale, and weeds are hard to kill. I stared at the vial, then back at the man. My mind raced, connecting the dots of fear and desperation I had felt earlier. What do you want? Information, he said simply, and in return, a path. A way to survive the revolt, to avoid the exhaustion that takes all zeroths. Why should I trust you? I asked, taking a step back. The cold air bit at my skin. The man tilted his head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. Because I know what it is like to be overlooked, to be deemed unworthy by the so-called kings of magic. And because I have seen what happens when you try to climb that ladder alone. He tossed the vial toward me. I caught it instinctively, the glass cool against my palm. Inside, the liquid bubbled lazily as if alive. Drink this at midnight. The figure stepped back into the shadows, his silhouette merging with the darkness of the alleyway. Do not think this is charity, the voice said, fading as he moved away from the wall. It is an investment. If you die, I lose a tool. If you succeed, I gain a weapon. Choose wisely, Zeroth. Wait, I shouted, taking a step forward. Who are you? What is in that vial? The man stopped. He did not turn around. Names are burdens, he replied, and the answer to your question will get you killed if you do not know what to do with it. Drink it at midnight, or do not. The choice is yours, Thaddeus Vale. But remember, time is a luxury you no longer possess. He vanished into the darkness so quickly I thought I had imagined him. The alley remained silent, save for the distant hum of magic in the citadel above, and the frantic beating of my own heart. I stood there for a long time, the vial heavy in my hand. The liquid inside swirled violently, reacting to my presence. It was not just a potion, it was a contract written in glass and green fire. I turned back toward the shack, my legs feeling like lead. Every step felt like a betrayal of my own survival instinct. But as I walked, the pendant in my pocket grew warmer, pulsing in rhythm with the green light of the vial. It was not just cooling me down, it was guiding me. Inside the shack, the silence was deafening. I sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the vial. The candle on the table had burned down to a nub, the wax pooling around its base like a frozen tear. A voice from the corner of my mind, sharp and cold, cut through my hesitation. Is it? Or are you just afraid of being right? I slammed my hand on the table, wincing as pain shot up my arm. Shut up, I hissed. I cannot, the voice replied, though no lips had moved. You brought me here, Thaddeus. You asked for power. A chance to what? To die in 10 years? Look at your hands, the voice commanded. Really look. I held up my left hand. The veins were visible, dark and thin against the pale skin. They were not glowing. They were empty. They are weak, I said. They are nothing. They are a canvas, the voice corrected. And you have been painting over them with fear for too long. The vial contains raw mana, unrefined, dangerous. But if your affinity is truly unknown, then it does not matter what it is. It only matters how you channel it. How do I channel it? I demanded. I have no spellbook, no instructor, no magic. You have a system, the voice said simply, and you have a choice. Drink at midnight, or go to sleep and wake up in 5 years to see the world burn. I looked at the hourglass on the table. The sand was trickling down, grain by grain. Each grain felt like a year of my life. Why midnight? I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. Why not now? Because noon is for fools, the voice replied. And you are not a fool. You are a gamer. and gamers wait for the right moment to make their move. I stood up, pacing the small length of the shack. The walls seemed to press in closer, the air growing thick and suffocating. I could feel the weight of my station pressing down on me. 0, unranked, negligible. A statistic in a world of gods? If I die, I said, stopping in front of the mirror above the sink, I die knowing I tried. If you live, the voice countered, you will know you conquered. I looked at my reflection. The face staring back was gaunt, eyes dark with exhaustion and fear, but beneath the fear, something else stirred. A spark, small, fragile, but undeniable. Conquered, I repeated. Is that what this is? It is the beginning, the voice said, of everything. I picked up the vial again. The green liquid swirled faster, forming shapes that looked like tiny storms. I could feel it calling to me, a siren song of power and ruin. What happens if I drink it? I asked. What do I lose? Everything you have left, the voice said without hesitation. Your safety, your ignorance, your humanity, and what do I gain? The truth, the voice replied, and the strength to face it. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The air tasted of ash and iron. It was time. The clock on the wall ticked toward 12. Then let us begin, I said. I uncorked, I turned the glass over, letting the viscous green fluid spill onto the rough wooden floor. It didn't splash. It hissed, eating through the varnish like acid, sending up a plume of sulphurous smoke that made my eyes water. Don't be ridiculous, I snapped at the empty air, wiping my hand on my trousers. I'm not going to swallow poison because some shadow merchant gave me a lecture. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. The vial clattered as it hit the floor, empty now. You think you have a choice? The voice murmured, not in my head this time, but from the corner of the room where the shadows pooled thickest. That is your first mistake, Thaddeus Vale. A figure detached itself from the darkness near the door. It wasn't the cloaked man from before. This one was shorter, wearing a tattered gray tunic that looked like it had been stitched from burlap sacks. His face was pale, his eyes wide and bloodshot, holding the frantic energy of someone who hadn't slept in days. Who are you? I demanded, backing up until my spine hit the cold wall of the shack. How did you get in here? The lock is meaningless to those who know how to listen, he said, stepping into the dim light of the flickering candle. He held up a hand, palm open. A small orb of blue light hovered above his skin, spinning lazily. I'm Silas, and you are wasting time. Silas? I repeated. The name meant nothing to me. No one named Silas in my former life, nor in the snippets of lore I'd consumed as a gamer. And what does that have to do with my time? I said no. Silas laughed, a dry, brittle sound. He closed his hand, extinguishing the light instantly. You said no to a vial. You did not say no to the revolt. You did not say no to the exhaustion. Your body is screaming, Vale. Can you not feel it? The cracks in your soul? I feel fine, I lied. My head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and my fingers twitched involuntarily.
You are lying to yourself.
Taking a step closer, he moved with an unnatural fluidity, his feet barely making a sound on the creaking floorboards. The system told you your potential is negligible. The system lies. It categorizes what it sees. It does not create reality. The system is my life, I countered, my voice rising in panic. It tells me I have 10 years. 10 years to live before my magic burns out my heart. 10 years of slow death, Silas corrected. A natural cause? Or an accidental one orchestrated by the mages who see you as a threat? Think, gamer. You played the games. You know the plot armor is fake. You know the developers watch from above. He leaned in, his breath smelling of stale wine and iron. I am not a friend. I am not an enemy. I am a mirror. Look at what you are losing. I'm losing nothing, I said, though my voice wavered. I'm alive. That's more than most zeroths get. Are you? Silas pulled back, his expression hardening. Or are you just waiting for the reckoning? The magic is revolting, Vale. It knows a host like you exists. A vessel with unknown affinity. Do you know what happens to vessels that are too small? I don't know, I admitted.
And I don't care. If I'm going to die, I'll die on my own terms. You cannot choose the timing of death, but you can choose the method. You want to prove yourself? Prove you are not a mistake.
I am Zeroth, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Unranked. The weakest human ever born with magical talent. There is no proving that. There is always a way to break the rules, Silas insisted. Your mentor gave you that pendant. It is broken, yes, but it still glows. Why? Because it is connected to something larger. A network of residual magic. The great convergence is coming, Vale. In 20 years, the barriers will thin. The mages will rise or fall based on what they have prepared. You have had less than 5 years since your exile. I touched the pendant in my pocket. It felt hot, burning against my hip. The mages' coven conspiracy, I whispered.
You think they know about me? I think they suspect, and suspicion is a death sentence for a Zeroth. They will not kill you themselves. It draws attention. They will let the world do it. They will let the exhaustion take you.
So what do I do? Silas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You gather strength, not the kind that comes from spellbooks or ranks, the kind that comes from desperation. From understanding the dark places where the light cannot touch, he reached into his tunic and pulled out a small, jagged shard of crystal. It was dark purple, almost black, and it pulsed with a faint, irregular rhythm. This is a piece of a broken ley line, a fragment of raw, chaotic magic. Hold it, I won't, I said, shaking my head. That's dangerous. It's unrefined mana. Thaddeus Vale woke to the cold bite of dawn seeping through the cracks in his shack's walls. The air was thick with dust and the scent of old wood, a stark contrast to the sterile, magical warmth he had known under his mentor's tutelage. His body felt heavy, weighed down by exhaustion and the lingering shock of exile. He lay still for a moment, staring at the rotting rafters above him, trying to process the sudden shift from fantasy to grim reality. In his former life, he had been a dedicated MMO player, spending countless hours dreaming about magic, never expecting to achieve it in such a harsh, unforgiving world. Now, that dream was a nightmare of survival and loss. He sat up slowly, his joints popping in the silence of the empty room. His hand instinctively went to his chest, fingers brushing against the fabric of his tunic where he kept the pendant. It was broken now, the chain snapped, but the star-shaped gem still pulsed with a faint, erratic light. It was no longer the steady beacon of guidance it had once been. Instead, it flickered like a dying flame, warning him of imminent failure due to his weak state. The system message that had appeared in his vision hours ago echoed in his mind. If I am a mistake, then let me be the exception. He clenched his fist around the pendant, feeling the jagged edge of the broken gem dig into his palm. Pain was real. Magic was real. Thaddeus stood up, his legs trembling slightly as he adjusted to the weight of his own body without magical support. He walked to the small, grimy window and pushed it open, letting in the chill morning air. Outside, the forest stretched out before him, dense and imposing. Shadows danced between the trees, not from the wind, but from something deeper, something wrong. He squinted, trying to focus on the patterns in the light filtering through the leaves. Normally, he would have dismissed it as a trick of the eye or fatigue, but the pendant's glow seemed to intensify in response to his gaze. Elena Sorvetti stepped out from behind the shack, her figure silhouetted against the rising sun. She had been waiting for him, her expression unreadable but her posture tense. She carried a satchel slung over her shoulder, its contents clinking softly with each step. Thaddeus turned to face her, noting the way her hand rested near the hilt of her dagger. It was a subtle reminder that she was still an ally in name, but their trust was fragile.
You're awake!
Walking closer until she stood just outside his door. Her boots crunched on the gravel path. I brought supplies. You need to eat before you do anything else. Thaddeus looked down at his empty hands, then back at her. I'm not hungry, Elena. Not yet. I was looking at the trees. She frowned, following his gaze out into the forest. What about them? There are patterns in the light, he said, pointing vaguely toward the edge of the clearing. Strange ones. They don't match the natural growth of the bark or the flow of the wind. It's like a code. Elena crossed her arms, skeptical but not dismissive. You've been gone too long without food. Delusions are starting to set in. Let's get you fed. Then we can talk about your codes. Thaddeus shook his head, stepping away from the window.
It's not a delusion. My mentor used to say that reality is just a veil. If you look hard enough, you can see what lies beneath. I think I'm starting to see it. Your mentor is gone, Thaddeus. He couldn't save you. And neither can his ghostly wisdom. You need grounding, not mysticism.
I don't need grounding, he snapped, turning to face her fully. I need power. I need to understand what's happening here before the dark takes over completely. If we wait for supplies or comfort, we'll be too late. Elena's eyes narrowed. The dark isn't coming for us in the next hour, Vale. But hunger is. Sit down. Eat. Then we'll discuss your magic theory over stew. Thaddeus hesitated, his mind racing. He wanted to argue, to demand that she see what he saw, but the weight of his physical weakness held him back. He nodded slowly, stepping aside to let her enter the shack. Fine. But after we eat, I'm going out there. I need to test this. Elena set the satchel on the table, pulling out a loaf of bread and some cheese. Test what? Your theory or your sanity? My ability, he corrected, taking the food from her hands. There's a difference. As they began to eat in silence, Thaddeus's mind remained fixed on the patterns outside. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the faint hum of energy that seemed to vibrate in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He opened his eyes and looked at Elena again.
Valiant Grimshaw would have laughed at this. He always said I was chasing phantoms. Valiant isn't here.
Her voice softening slightly.
We are. And we're all we have. So don't push yourself too hard today.
Thaddeus nodded, biting into the bread. He chewed slowly, Thaddeus chewed slowly, forcing the dry bread down his throat while keeping his eyes locked on Elena's face. He needed to understand her position, to parse the logic behind her caution if he was to use it as a foundation for his own rise. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the scratch of Elena's knife against her wooden bowl.
Raven Larkwood wouldn't have waited.
Breaking the quiet, he set the half-eaten loaf aside, his appetite suddenly lost to urgency. She would have moved while I was weak, while I was sleeping. Lena didn't look up from her food. She scooped a spoonful of stew, the steam rising in curling ribbons between them. Raven is not here. You are imagining enemies that don't exist yet. Are they? Thaddeus stood up abruptly, the chair scraping harshly against the floorboards. He paced the small length of the shack, his hands moving as if manipulating invisible strings in the air.
Or am I simply finally seeing them because I'm no longer blinded by comfort? My mentor taught me that magic is not just energy, it is structure. And structures have flaws. Thaddeus,
Her spoon hovering midair.
sit down. You're vibrating like a nervous child.
I am vibrating with potential, he corrected, stopping to face her directly. His voice was low, devoid of the tremor that had plagued him moments ago. Elena lowered her spoon, setting it down with a deliberate clink. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, her expression hardening. You're talking nonsense again. That's how you got us exiled. Chasing phantoms while the real world burned. The real world is burning because I couldn't see the patterns. Thaddeus shot back, his confidence surging with the adrenaline of argument. He grabbed his broken pendant, holding it up so the erratic glow illuminated his face. Resources? Elena let out a short, bitter laugh. She stood up as well, closing the distance between them until they were nearly toe to toe. You think you can find something useful out there in the wilderness with nothing but a broken rock and a head full of delusions? Valiant Grimshaw had resources. He had an army, and he failed. You have nothing.
He trusted systems that could fail him. I am learning to rely only on what I can perceive, what I can control. That's not control.
jabbing a finger toward his chest.
That's obsession. You're throwing away your sanity for a ghost of magic that doesn't want you.
It doesn't matter if it wants me.
Stepping back to avoid her touch.
It matters if I can take it. Weakness is just a lack of information, Elena, and I am gaining information every second.
Elena stared at him, her chest heaving slightly. She looked from his face to the pendant, then back to his eyes. For a moment, the doubt in her gaze was palpable, but she shook her head and turned away.
If you go out there today, you go alone. I'm not following you into whatever madness you've decided to chase. You want to prove yourself? Prove it. But don't expect me to clean up your body when it hits the ground. I don't need a cleanup crew.
His voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than her shouting. I need discovery. I need access. He walked past her toward the door, his hand reaching for the latch. He didn't look back at her. He didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air behind him, the heavy silence of her resignation. But it didn't matter. Thaddeus threw the door open and stepped out into the harsh daylight. The forest loomed ahead, a wall of green and shadow that seemed to pulse with a rhythm he could now almost hear. He adjusted his tunic, gripping the pendant until the jagged edges cut into his palm. The pain was grounding, a reminder of his physical state even as his mind reached outward. He closed his eyes for a second, ignoring the bright sun, and focused on the hum in the air. He could feel them tugging at him, like fish on a line.
You're making a mistake.
Elena's voice called out from behind him, sharp and clear in the sudden stillness of the clearing. There is no magic here for you, Vale, only the dark. Thaddeus didn't stop walking. He kept his eyes closed, letting the sensory input guide him deeper into the tree line. The underbrush tore at his clothes, branches snagged his hair, but he pushed forward. Let the wind shifted, carrying the scent of damp earth and something sharper, metallic. Thaddeus opened his eyes. The forest was no longer just trees. It was a lattice of glowing threads, faint and erratic, weaving through the bark and stone. He stepped forward, his boot crunching on a bed of dead leaves. A low thrumming noise vibrated in his teeth. Thaddeus, a voice cut through the air, sharp as a whip crack. Stop. He froze. He hadn't heard anyone approach. The silence of the forest was absolute now. I said stop. A figure emerged from behind a massive oak, stepping into the dappled light. It was Elena. She had followed him. Her face was pale, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she wasn't alone. From the shadows to his left, another figure stepped out. Tall, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to reflect no light.
Who is this?
His voice steady despite the sudden spike in his heart rate. He kept his hand on the pendant.
This is Valiant Grimshaw.
Her voice tight.
Or what's left of him.
Valiant didn't look at Thaddeus. He looked at the ground, tracing a line with the toe of his boot. You're walking into a trap, Vale. A stupid, arrogant trap. You think you can see? You can't even stand. And I'm not lost. I'm following the patterns. You should try it sometime, Valiant. Before your ego went blind. Valiant laughed, a dry, rasping sound. Ego? You want to talk about ego? Look at you. Exiled. Broken. Chasing ghosts because your mentor couldn't save his own skin. I stayed. I fought. And what did I get? He gestured to his scarred face. This. The dark doesn't care about your potential, boy. It eats it.
And I'm becoming strong. Faster than you ever did, you relied on titles, on hierarchy. I rely on observation. Observation gets you killed.
He raised a hand, and the air around him warped. Shadows detached themselves from the tree trunks, coalescing into jagged shapes.
Magic isn't just patterns, Vale. It's power. And right now, you have none. I have this.
Holding up the pendant, the glow intensified, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Valiant glanced down at his arm. For a split second, confusion flickered across his face. Then he scowled and waved the shadows away. The jagged shapes dissolved into mist. Don't play games with me. You're weak. Your system is failing. I can see it in your eyes. You're dizzy. I'm focused, Thaddeus corrected. He took another step. The gap between them closed to 10 feet. And I know why you're here, Valiant. Not to stop me, to test me. If I fail, you'll finish the job Raven Larkwood started. Isn't that right? Valiant's eyes narrowed.
Raven is a fool, but she had instincts. You have nothing but arrogance. I have discovery.
He closed his eyes again, shutting out Valiant's mocking gaze and Elena's worried stare. He reached out with his mind, following the threads he saw in the air. They were tangled here, knotted around a central point. A node.
There's something here, under the roots of that tree. Don't,
She stepped between Thaddeus and the tree.
Thaddeus, don't touch it. We don't know what it is.
Or you're hallucinating, Valiant spat. Look at your hands, Vale. They're trembling. Thaddeus looked down. His hands were indeed shaking. Weakness is just a lack of control, he said quietly, and I am gaining control. He pushed past Elena. She tried to grab his arm, but he was already moving, driven by the compulsion of the pattern. He reached the tree. The roots were thick, twisted like serpents, but they weren't wood. They were crystal, translucent and humming with violet light.
Elena.
Watch. What are you doing?
Her voice rising in panic. Thaddeus, step away. Shh, he said. He placed his hand on the crystal root. It was cold. Then it burned. A shockwave of energy shot up his arm. His vision whited out. A system message flashed in his mind, not with text, but with pure data. New magic pattern detected, pattern description obtained. He gasped, falling back onto the forest floor. The pain was excruciating, but within it lay clarity. He saw the pattern clearly now. Thaddeus gasped, his lungs burning as if he'd just inhaled glass. He lay on the damp moss, staring up at the canopy where the glowing threads pulsed with violent urgency. The system message hung in his vision, stark and undeniable. He pushed himself up, his arms trembling but holding. Valiant Grimshaw stood over him, looming like a storm cloud. His eyes were wide, stripped of their earlier mockery, replaced by a cold, calculating dread.
I did.
Wiping blood from his lip where he'd bitten through the skin in the shock. He looked at his hand. The veins were darkened, tracing the path of the energy he had just tapped into. The pattern is real, Valiant. You can deny it, but you can't unsee what I see. Elena stepped forward, her face pale. She kept a wary distance from Valiant, keeping herself between her former friend and the rival mage. Thaddeus, stop, she said sharply.
Look at him. He's not trying to help you. He's looking for an excuse to kill you.
His gaze was locked on Thaddeus's exposed hand.
You touched a ley line node without a focus matrix, without a conduit. You should be dead. Your soul should have been ripped out of your body. My system is failing.
Struggling to his feet, he swayed, grabbing the trunk of the oak for support. The bark felt rough and real under his palm, grounding him against the swirling colors in his mind. But it's adapting. That's the point, isn't it? Evolution requires risk.
Evolution? You call this evolution? This is suicide. Raven Larkwood would have killed you for your incompetence before she let you touch that raw power.
Elena.
Not turning his head.
Tell him what I told you. Tell him about the patterns.
Elena hesitated. She looked at Valiant, then back to Thaddeus. Her jaw tightened. He sees magic as structure, she said stiffly, as something that can be mapped and understood. Like a game mechanic. Valiant sneered. A game mechanic? Is that what you call the forces that destroyed your mentor? You reduce the sacred arts to playground rules because you're afraid of the reality of them. I reduce it to something I can control, Thaddeus countered. He took a step toward Valiant. The movement was slow, deliberate. And you're afraid of control. That's why you fight with shadows, because you have no substance of your own. The air around him crackled with static.
Careful, Vale. You're dancing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong step, and you fall into the abyss. The abyss is where the light comes from.
He raised his hand again, looking at the darkened veins.
I'm not falling, I'm climbing, and I'm taking this with me. It's already burning.
He closed his eyes, focusing on the hum in his blood. The pain was sharp, but it was manageable. He could shape it. He could direct it, and I'm not letting go. Elena grabbed Thaddeus's shoulder. Her grip was tight, desperate.
Thaddeus, listen to me. If you keep this, if you try to hold on to that pattern without a proper vessel, it will consume you. You're too weak right now. Weakness is just a lack of information.
Quoting his own earlier thought. He looked at her.
And I am gaining information every second.
Elena stared at him, her chest heaving slightly. She looked from his face to the pendant, then back to his eyes. For a moment, the doubt in her gaze was palpable, but she shook her head and turned away.
If you go out there today, you go alone. I'm not following you into whatever madness you've decided to chase. You want to prove yourself? Prove it. But don't expect me to clean up your body when it hits the ground. I don't need a cleanup crew.
His voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than her shouting. I need discovery. I need access. He walked past her toward the deeper forest, away from Valiant and Elena. He didn't look back. He needed to understand what he had just received. The pattern was still fresh in his mind, a complex map of energy flows. He needed to rebuild the foundations of his magic, brick by broken brick. Valiant watched him go, his face grim. He's chasing power he can't wield. Raven will be pleased. Elena turned on him, her eyes flashing. Shut up, Valiant. You just want him to fail so you can feel superior. But he saw something you didn't. Valiant shrugged, turning away. Sight is useless without strength. He'll be dead by nightfall. Or worse. Thaddeus walked deeper into the woods. The light filtered through the leaves in dappled patches, but the damp chill of the shack seeped through the thin wool of my ordinary cloak, biting at my skin like a forgotten memory. I woke on the floor, the straw mattress offering no comfort, only the sharp pricks of dried stalks against my palm. The air smelled of rot and old magic, a scent that clung to the corners of this cramped space where I had been cast out by peers due to his inability to do more than stammer basic cantrips without collapsing into unconsciousness. I reached for the star pendant at my throat, my fingers trembling as they brushed the cold metal. It was broken now, snapped clean through the center, yet it glowed brightly with a faint, eerie luminescence that pulsed in time with my own frantic heartbeat. The light did not warm me. It illuminated the shadows in ways that made my stomach turn. I saw them then, strange patterns weaving through the air like invisible threads, glowing with hues of violet and sickly green. My mentor had once told me to look past the surface, to see through the veil of reality, but no one had believed him then. Now, exiled and alone, those words echoed in my mind with terrifying clarity. A system message burned across my vision, red and jagged, demanding attention. Severe exhaustion warning. Risk of instant death if I am a mistake. Then let me be the exception. I whispered to the empty room, my voice cracking from disuse. The fear was still there, crouching in the back of my throat, paralyzing and cold. This fearful community that had refused aid left me with nothing but a lack of recognition and resources compared to others who soared on wings of effortless power. But as I stared at the broken pendant, I realized something else. The patterns were not just random noise, they were instructions, or perhaps invitations. The Grand Arcane Council had cast me out for being weak, for being the weakest magic user in a village known for producing nothing but disappointment. But weakness was simply unrefined strength waiting for the right pressure to shatter its limits. I needed to prove myself, not to them, to myself. I stood up, my legs shaky, and pulled the meager supply of basic spell scrolls from my pack. The parchment felt fragile in my hands, like dried leaves ready to crumble. I unrolled the first one, the ink fading but still legible. It was a simple light cantrip, designed for children who could not even hold a wand correctly. For anyone else, it would have been trivial. For me, it was a death sentence waiting to happen. I can do this, I said, forcing the words out. I must embrace the very source of my weakness. The pendant flared brighter, the light streaming from its fractured core, shooting down my arm and into my chest. The veins in my neck bulged, the patterns in the air twisted, forming a spiral that dragged at my vision. I could feel the magical energy around me, hidden resources lying dormant in the wood of the walls, the dirt of the floor, waiting to be tapped. If I pulled too hard, the vein would burst. If I pulled too little, nothing would happen. I took a deep breath, ignoring the tremor in my hands, and began to trace the pattern in the air with my finger. The moment my skin touched the invisible thread, pain exploded behind my eyes. It was not physical pain, but a psychic scream as the magic tried to force its way into me through a blocked pipe. "You think you can just take what isn't yours?" I hissed, gritting my teeth as the room began to spin. The shadows lengthened, detaching themselves from the walls and coiling around my ankles like cold snakes. "I don't want your pity. I want your power." The scroll in my other hand burst into flames, not from heat, but from pure magical discharge. I dropped it, stumbling back against the wall. The patterns were everywhere now, a dense web of energy that screamed for direction. My body felt like a vessel too small for an ocean. Every cell vibrated with the threat of rupture. "The only thing truly impossible is what we do not believe in," I gasped, forcing my finger to continue the motion despite the agony tearing through my muscles. The light from the pendant blinded me, washing out everything but the swirling vortex before me. "So believe it. Believe I will survive this." The pressure mounted, a crushing weight on my lungs that made each breath a labor. The system warning flashed again, more urgent than before. "Risk of instant death. Energy core integrity critical." I laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Let it break," I said, and pushed harder. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. The light from the pendant dimmed to a sullen ember, casting long, jagged shadows across the cracked floorboards. I slumped forward, hands braced on my knees, waiting for the collapse that the system promised but had not yet delivered. A voice cut through the haze. It was rough, stripped of any warmth, belonging to the village elder who monitored our peripheral compliance. "You draw too much attention with your tantrums, Vale." I did not look up. I kept my eyes fixed on a knot in the wood of the floor, where the grain seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat.
The magic does not respond to volume, Elder Kale. It responds to precision, and I lack the foundation to be precise without risk. Risk is what separates the mages from the laborers.
The creak of his boots approached, slow and deliberate.
We have no room for experiments that nearly burn down the perimeter wards. The council's patience is thin. Your exile was a mercy. Do not test its limits again.
"My exile is the only thing keeping me alive," I said, lifting my head just enough to meet his gaze. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line etched by decades of suppressing potential. "You fear what you cannot measure. That is your weakness, not mine." Kale stopped inches from me. I could smell the stale wine on his breath and the ozone tang of residual magic clinging to his robes. He looked down at me with a mixture of pity and disdain, the way one might view a broken tool that might still be sharp enough to cut if handled with care. "You speak like a man who understands power? I hear only the ramblings of someone addicted to the thrill of failure. You have no resources, Vale. No patron, no backing. I have this," I said, tapping the cold metal against my sternum. The pendant gave a faint, irregular throb in response, a heartbeat out of sync with my own.
And I have seen the patterns. You see only the surface because you are content to be blind. I see the veins of the world. Then let them feed you.
His composure fracturing for a split second.
If your visions are so potent, then feed them to me. Cast the light cantrip you were just mocking. Prove that your strength is not just illusion.
"I cannot simply cast it," I said, pushing myself up. My legs shook, but I locked my knees. "It requires a conduit, a path through the veil. Without the proper alignment, the energy backlashes. You saw what happened when I tried to stabilize it moments ago. I saw you flail like a drowning child," Kale corrected. He stepped closer, invading my personal space, his shadow swallowing me whole. "The village does not tolerate incompetence in its periphery. If you are truly so gifted, then prove your utility. Retrieve the scattered components from the old well before nightfall, or remain here and starve." He turned on his heel, his robes sweeping the dust. "Do not make me report your instability to the council. They do not wait for accidents to correct their mistakes." I watched him go, the tension in my shoulders easing only slightly as he retreated toward the door. You think I need your charity to function? I called out, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands.
I do not work for you, Kale. I work for survival, and survival requires resources you cannot give. Resources are earned.
His hand rested on the doorframe, his knuckles white. And you have spent yours all. He stepped out into the gray light of the village square. The door groaned shut, leaving me in the dimness of the shack. I stood alone, the silence rushing back in to fill the void he had left. The patterns were still there, fainter now, retreating into the background noise of reality, but they were visible. They were waiting. I walked to the corner where I had thrown my meager supply of basic spell scrolls. One lay crumpled near the threshold, its edges blackened by the magical discharge. I picked it up, brushing off the ash. The ink was still legible, the simple diagram of a light orb intact. You want me to perform? I asked the empty room, though I knew no one was listening. Then watch closely. I unrolled the scroll flat on my lap. My fingers traced the lines of the incantation. It was basic, elementary, designed for those with stable cores and years of training. For me, it was a suicide note written in mana. But as I looked at the parchment, the broken pendant against my chest flared again, not with light, but with a cold, sharp clarity. The veil tore open in my vision. The scroll was no longer paper and ink. It was a lattice of glowing threads, a three-dimensional structure hovering in the air. The light orb diagram pulsed with potential energy, waiting for a trigger. I closed my eyes, focusing on the thread that connected the scroll to the ambient magic in the room. It was thin, frayed, and dangerous. But it was there. I need to connect, I whispered. I need to bridge the gap. The gap is where you break, a voice murmured. It was not Kale. It was deeper, older, vibrating from the walls themselves. I froze. My eyes snapped open. The shack was empty. But the air shimmered, and for a moment I saw a shape in the corner. A figure draped in a hooded figure stepped from the shadows, its form shifting like smoke caught in a draft. It did not have a face, only a void where features should be, yet I felt its gaze press against my skin like cold fingers. Who are you? I demanded, my hand tightening around the crumpled scroll until the paper bit into my palm. Show yourself. The figure tilted its head, a jerky, unnatural motion that made my stomach turn. Names are for things that exist within boundaries, Vale. I am the space between your heartbeats. I am the silence after the spell fails. Speak plainly, I snapped, though my voice lacked its usual authority. The exhaustion was a heavy cloak I could not shrug off. If you are here to mock me, you have wasted your time. I have no patience for phantoms. Mockery implies I care about your perception, the entity replied, taking a step closer. The floorboards did not creak under its weight. It seemed to float an inch above the wood. I am here because the threads are vibrating. You are pulling on them with desperate strength. Do you know what happens when the loom breaks? I know that I will die if I continue, I said, my eyes fixed on the swirling patterns only I could see. They were converging on me now, drawn by the broken pendant's erratic pulse. But I have no choice. The council has closed the gates. Kale has cut off the supply. If I do not master this, I perish. Then you understand the stakes, the voice said. It came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating in my teeth. Most mages seek power to control others. You seek it to control yourself. There is a difference. One is a disease, the other is a cure. A cure? I laughed, a harsh, barking sound. What cure exists for those who are exiled? For those deemed too weak to wield even the simplest cantrip without nearly killing themselves? The cure is not in the spell, the figure said, raising a hand that dissolved into mist before it reached my face. The cure is in the source. You look at the scroll and see ink. You look at your hands and see flesh. You do not see the dark veins that run beneath both. I see nothing but my own failure, I spat. I see a broken pendant and a dying man. You see what you are allowed to see. The entity corrected. The veil is thin here, Veil. Thinner than in the Grand Arcane Council's pristine towers. Here, in the mud of the outskirts, reality bleeds through. That is why you survive. Not because you are strong, but because you are invisible to those who would harvest you. I stared at the figure, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The patterns around me were shifting, rearranging themselves into shapes that resembled roots or veins. They pulsed with a dark violet hue that had no name in any of my scrolls. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Why help me if I am just another failure?" "I do not help," the figure said. "I observe, and I offer a trade. You have the sight, however broken it may be. Most cannot see what lies beneath the surface. You can. Use that sight to find what others ignore. Find the resources that decay in the dark. Gather them. Feed the pendant. In exchange, you will learn to cast without fear. And if I refuse?" I asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of my impending doom. "Then you remain here," the figure said, its form beginning to fade, turning transparent like mist burning away in the sun. "You struggle against a tide that drowns everyone who touches it. You will fail, and your failure will be forgotten by all, even those who knew you existed. Is that not a fate worse than death?" I looked down at the scroll in my hands. The diagram of the light orb seemed to mock me, simple and sterile. But as I looked closer, guided by the pendant's faint glow, I saw something else. Tiny, almost invisible gaps in the ink where the magic should flow. Gaps that could be bridged. "What kind of resources?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the figure until it was nothing but a ripple in the air. "Where do I find them?" "Look to the old well," the voice echoed, fading rapidly. "Not for water, for the shadows that pool there at night. They are potent. They are untamed. And they are yours for the taking." "I am not a thief," I said, though my heart hammered against my ribs with a sudden, terrifying hope. "You are an exile," the voice whispered, final and distant. "You have no right to anything, so take what you need, before the fear returns." The shack was silent again. The darkness in the corner had receded, leaving only the dust motes dancing in the sliver of light from the window. I sat there for a long time, the scroll heavy in my lap. My body screamed for rest, every muscle trembling with the aftershocks of the previous exertion. But beneath the pain, there was a new sensation. A clarity. I stood up, my legs stiff but functional. I walked to the window and looked out at the village. The houses were small, huddled together for warmth against the biting wind. In the distance, the spires of the Grand Arcane Council pierced the clouds, shining with pristine white magic that seemed utterly untouched by the grime of the world below. "They think they are safe up there," I muttered to myself. The silence of the shack was no longer a void, it was a held breath. I tightened the ordinary cloak around my shoulders, the coarse fabric rough against my neck, and slipped the broken star pendant deeper into my tunic. The weight of it was familiar now, a cold anchor in the chaos of my mind. The entity's words echoed in the hollows of my skull, the dark veins that run beneath both. I grabbed the meager supply of basic spell scrolls from the corner, shoving them into my pack alongside a handful of dried rations. I needed to move. The fear that had paralyzed me for days was still there, coiled in my gut, but it was no longer the only thing driving me. It was the clarity of the patterns, the promise of the old well. Stepping out onto the muddy path, I kept my head down. The village of Thaddeus Vale was known for producing the weakest magic users ever, and we wore that shame like a badge. Neighbors who had once nodded in polite acknowledgement now looked away, their faces tight with the fearful community's refusal to aid someone marked by failure. To be associated with me was to risk contamination by my weakness. Vale. The voice came from the alleyway between two crumbling stone houses. I stopped, my hand going to the pouch at my belt where I kept my last few copper coins. A figure stepped into the dim light. It was Ilara, a woman who had once shared a classroom with me years ago, back when hope was not yet a dead thing. Her eyes were wide, darting toward the street before locking onto mine. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice low. "I have no money for alms." Alara took a step closer, her hand gripping the strap of her bag tightly. "I didn't come for your coin. I came because I saw you leaving. People are talking. They say you're going to the old well." "I go where I please," I said, turning away. "Leave me be, Alara. You do not want my troubles on your doorstep." She grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "It's not about trouble. It's about safety. The shadows in that well aren't just magic. They're hungry. And you're empty. You're a vessel without a lid. If you go there, you'll spill everything. Or it will spill you." I pulled my arm free, stepping back into the shadow of the alley. "And if I stay here?" "The council exiled me." Kale cut me off. "I am already dead, Ilara. I am just waiting for the body to catch up." "Then let me help," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There are resources in the village stores. Herbs, salts, safe ones. I can slip them out if you promise me you won't touch the dark magic. Not yet. Build something stable first. Rebuilding foundations takes time, not desperation." I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear in her eyes, but also a flicker of pity. It was a dangerous thing to be pitied by someone who had power and you did not. "No," I said, shaking my head.
Safe magic is what killed me before. It's weak. It's constrained by rules written by those who have never struggled. I don't need herbs. I need strength. You're making a mistake.
Her voice rising slightly before she checked herself, glancing around nervously. "The Grand Arcane Council monitors the outskirts for exactly this reason. If they catch you dipping into untamed sources, they won't just exile you. They'll purge you." "Let them try," I said, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "I have nothing left to lose." "You have your life," she snapped. "Don't throw it away on a ghost story. The old well is cursed. Everyone knows it. Everyone believes what they're told to believe," I replied. I stepped past her into the open street. "Stay in the light, Ilara. It's safer there." I walked faster then, putting distance between us and the village center. The patterns in my vision intensified as I moved away from the cluster of houses, the ambient magic of the settlement fading into a dull hum. Here, on the outskirts, the veil was thinner. I could feel it pulling at me, a gravitational tug toward the north, where the jagged silhouette of the old well rose against the twilight sky. As I approached the tree line, the air grew cold. The trees here were twisted, their bark blackened as if by fire long ago. This was the boundary of the fearful community's influence. Beyond this point, there were no paths, only trails picked clean by animals and outcasts. I stopped at the edge of the clearing surrounding the well. It was a circle of bare earth, devoid of grass or moss. In the center stood a stone rim, cracked and worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. At the bottom, far below, a black pool sat undisturbed. There was no water in it, just shadows that seemed to writhe and coil even without a breeze. I climbed down the slope, my boots sinking into the damp earth. The closer I got, the more the patterns swirled around me, vibrant and angry. They were drawn to the well like moths to a flame. Standing at the edge of the rim, I looked down. The darkness was deep, absolute. "Well?" I called out, my voice swallowed by the void below. "Is this where you hide your secrets?" A ripple moved across the surface of the shadows. A shape formed beneath the blackness, rising slowly to meet me. Thaddeus Vale woke to the smell of damp rot and the cold bite of dawn leaking through the cracks in his shack's wooden walls. The air was thick with the dust of exile, clinging to his skin like a second layer of poverty. He lay still for a moment, listening to the distant rhythmic thrum of the city's lower wards, a sound that usually comforted him, but now felt like a taunt. On the rough-hewn table beside his bed lay the remnants of his mentor's gift, the star pendant. Its silver chain snapped, its gem cracked down the center. Yet, It glowed with an impossible, feverish light, pulsing in time with the warning that scrolled across his vision. System warning, imminent tableria detected. Magical reserves critical. Survival probability decreasing.
Useless.
Sitting up and rubbing his face with hands that trembled not from fear, but from the raw exhaustion of survival. He looked at the broken gem. It was a relic of a dead man's hope, glowing in the dark to remind him that he was nothing more than a failed mage, a mistake in the grand tapestry of magical history. But as he stared into the fractured light, something shifted in his mind. The patterns around him, the way the dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, the subtle hum of the ley lines beneath the floorboards began to resolve into a coherent map. He saw not just decay, but potential. Weakness is merely potential unfulfilled, he whispered, the words feeling less like a mantra and more like a truth he had finally accepted. The door to his shack burst open, splintering the old wood around the frame. 3 figures stood in the threshold, silhouetted against the harsh morning light. They wore the robes of the council's inspectors, the gray fabric marked with the silver sigils of authority that Thaddeus Vale had once dreamed of earning. But their eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with a disdain that went beyond mere professional duty. Thaddeus Vale, said Inspector Cale, stepping over the threshold without invitation. He was a tall man, his posture rigid, his face a mask of bureaucratic indifference.
You are overdue for your status review. I've been busy trying not to die, Cale.
Standing up slowly, he kept his hands visible, palms open, but his mind was already racing, analyzing the geometry of their stance, the spacing between them. Did you come to deliver a warning, or just another eviction notice? Inspector Alara, the woman on Cale's left, stepped forward. She held a scroll case in one hand, her fingers tapping impatiently against the leather. The council does not send warnings to those who have already failed, she said, her voice clipped and precise.
They send assessments, and your assessment is troubling. Troubling how?
Tilting his head, he could see the subtle tension in Alara's shoulders, the way her weight shifted slightly toward Cale. They were not here to help him. They were here to exploit him. The realization hit him with the clarity of a struck match. Inspector Joran, the third figure, remained in the shadows, his face obscured by the brim of his hood. He did not speak, but he shifted his grip on the staff at his side, knuckles white.
You have been observed,
His voice low and gravelly.
using unauthorized magical practices in a restricted zone.
Thaddeus Vale laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the small shack.
Unauthorized? I haven't cast a single spell since my exile. I can barely light a candle without risking a heart attack. You think I'm doing magic? Please. I'm surviving. There's a difference, are there?
Stepping closer. The light from the doorway caught the cold gleam in his eyes. Because our sources indicate that you are gathering resources. Hidden ones. Resources that belong to the council by decree of the High Magus. Thaddeus Vale felt a chill run down his spine, but he forced his expression to remain sarcastic. Gathering, I scavenge for scraps, Cale. If I find anything useful, it's usually because no one else wanted it. And if you're talking about magic, well, let's not pretend I'm capable of much more than breathing. Alara unrolled the scroll, her eyes scanning the text quickly. We have a report that you are in contact with rogue elements, she said, looking up from the paper. Elements who wish to see your demise? Or your conversion? Thaddeus Vale crossed his arms, leaning back against his table. The star pendant on the nightstand pulsed brighter, responding to his rising anxiety.
So, I'm a pariah. People want me dead all the time. It's part of the job description. Not everyone wants you dead, Thaddeus.
His voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
Some people want what you can provide. You have a talent for seeing things others miss, for finding gaps in the veil.
Thaddeus Vale's eyes narrowed. He looked at Joran again. The rogue hadn't moved, but his staff was pointed slightly toward Thaddeus's chest. It wasn't a threat of violence, it was a measurement. They were testing him, seeing how he reacted, seeing if he was afraid.
You're lying.
The words sharp and sudden.
You don't want my help.
You want me because I'm dead weight. You want to strip mine my residual aura while I'm still breathing so you can claim the salvage rights. It's theft, plain and simple. Inspector Kale sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed designed to make Thaddeus Vale look like a hysterical child rather than a rational accuser. He gestured vaguely at the cracked gem on the table. Desperation makes for poor logic, Vale. We are offering you protection. The rogue elements Alara mentioned, they do not care if you live or die. They care about what is inside you. We can contain it. We can regulate it. Without us, you will be hunted down by the very people we are shielding you from. Shielding me, Thaddeus Vale repeated, the sarcasm dripping off his tongue like poison. He picked up the broken pendant, feeling its heat against his palm. The light was no longer just a warning, it was a map. He could see the faint, shimmering threads of mana radiating from the gem, connecting to the walls of his shack, then extending out into the night, weaving through the city's infrastructure like a spider's web. And who are these rogue elements, Kale? Or is that just council code for anyone who refuses to pay the tithe? Inspector Alara rolled up the scroll with a sharp snap of her wrist, the leather creaking in the silent room. She did not look at Thaddeus Vale. She looked at Kale.
He is resistant. He sees too much. He sees what we allow him to see.
The hooded figure finally stepped forward, his staff tapping against the rotting floorboards. Tap, tap. Each sound was precise, measured. The veil is thin here, Vale. You have found a leak. We know you have. Thaddeus Vale's heart hammered against his ribs, but his face remained a mask of bored indifference. He dropped the pendant onto the table. It didn't clang, it hummed, a low-frequency vibration that made the dust on the wood dance in concentric circles.
A leak? Or just my eyes adjusting to the dark? I've been blind for 3 years, Yorin. Maybe now that the bandages are off, I'm seeing things that were always there. Stop playing games.
His composure cracking for a fraction of a second. His hand went to his belt, where a small vial of silvery liquid rested.
You are weak. Your reserves are critical. The system told us. You are on the brink of collapse. Why do you think we haven't arrested you yet? Why do you think you are still breathing in this hovel? Mercy. Or perhaps fear. Fear?
Ilara laughed, a cold, brittle sound. Of what? You? I'm walking into a trap, Thaddeus Vale corrected her. He looked directly at Joran. And you know it. If you wanted to kill me, you would have done it when I was weakest. Instead, you are here to negotiate, which means I have something you need, something the Council is too cowardly to take by force. Kale's eyes widened slightly. The mask slipped further, revealing the panic beneath. You are guessing, Vale? And guessing wrong. Am I? Thaddeus Vale leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper that forced them to lean in to hear him. You are not here to assess my status. You are here to secure a source. The ley lines beneath this ward are shifting. You felt it when I woke up. The surge. That surge is unique to me. It is unstable, and it is dangerous. If I die, the backlash could wipe out 3 blocks of the lower city. But if I live, if I learn to control it, that energy could power the Council's entire upper district for a decade. Joran stiffened. His grip on the staff tightened until his knuckles turned white.
You speak of things you do not understand. I understand leverage.
He pointed at the vial in Kale's hand.
That is a suppressant. You plan to drug me, drag me to a containment cell, and strip mine my core. But now that you know I can see the flow, you realize you can't just cut me out without breaking the dam. So here is your new offer. Let me stay. Let me practice. And if I succeed, you get your power source. If I fail, you get to collect the debris.
Alara's expression hardened. She exchanged a glance with Kale. It was quick, but Thaddeus Vale caught the shift in their posture, the subtle recoil of their bodies away from his table as if he were radioactive. They were afraid. Not of him, but of what he represented. The unpredictability of a variable they couldn't control.
You are arrogant. You think you can bargain with the Council?
I think I am the only one who knows where the bodies are buried.
He tapped his temple.
And the Council loves its secrets more than its laws. Now, do we have an accord? Or do I start screaming about illegal surveillance and magical extortion in front of my neighbors?
Kale stared at him for a long moment. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand from his belt.
You will report to us daily.
His voice flat.
You will allow periodic inspections.
And you will share any discoveries. Kale set the vial down on the table with a sharp clink. Daily reports. Detailed. And you will not leave the ward without permission. Thaddeus Vale let out a breath he didn't know he was holding.
Permission? From whom? You three? From whoever is appointed to oversee your rehabilitation.
Straightening his coat. He looked at Alara. She nodded once, a stiff, jerky motion. Joran remained silent, his staff resting lightly against the floorboards, but his eyes had shifted from measurement to calculation. They were no longer looking at him as a broken man. They were looking at him as a resource. A dangerous one, but a resource nonetheless.
And if I refuse?
Picking up the star pendant again. It was warm now, almost hot, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. He could feel the mana in the air, thick and cloying like humidity before a storm. It wasn't just around him, it was everywhere, seeping through the cracks in the walls, pooling in the corners of the room.
You'd arrest me? With what evidence? That I'm breathing too loudly? With the knowledge that you're sitting on a live wire?
His voice was like gravel grinding together. He stepped into the light, revealing the scars running up his neck, disappearing into his collar.
The Council does not negotiate with anomalies, Vale. We contain them. You have forced us to treat you as a partner because your survival is more profitable than your corpse. Do not mistake this for friendship. Survival is its own currency.
He stood up, his legs trembling slightly but holding firm.
And right now, I am rich. So, daily reports. Got it. Now, if you're quite done inspecting my misery, I have work to do.
Kale hesitated, his hand twitching toward his belt again.
What work? You can't cast anything. Your core is fractured. One wrong move and you'll burn out your nervous system. That's why I'm not casting.
Walking past them toward the door, he didn't look back.
I'm listening. And unlike you, I can hear the city breathing. It's louder than you think.
He stepped out into the night air, leaving them standing in the dim light of his shack. The moment the door clicked shut behind him, the sarcasm drained from his face, replaced by a cold, hard focus. He walked quickly down the alleyway, turning corners at random until he was sure they weren't following. Then he ducked into a shadowed alcove and pulled out the pendant. The light inside was no longer just a warning. It was a map. He closed his eyes and reached out with his senses, not trying to cast, but to feel. The veil of reality thinned here. He could see it, literally see it as a shimmering membrane over the world. And through it, he saw the leaks. The places where magic bled into the mundane. They were everywhere. But some were brighter than others. And 3 blocks away, in the ruins of the old library, there was a hole so large it looked like a tear in the fabric of his vision.
You cannot betray a lie you believe.
He opened his eyes and grinned. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the grin of a man who had just realized he was holding a knife and didn't need permission to use it. 3 days later, Thaddeus Vale sat in the back of a tea house in the lower district. He wore a heavy cloak, hood up, hiding his face. On the table before him lay a stolen ledger, its pages filled with coded entries. He had spent the last 72 hours tracking the mana leaks, mapping them against the city's infrastructure. He had found patterns that pointed to theft. "You're staring at that book like it owes you money," a voice said from across the table. Thaddeus didn't look up. "I'm counting, and I think I've found where they've been hiding the surplus." The man opposite him leaned in. This was Silas, a rogue mage who operated in the shadows of the lower district. He had no title, no rank, just a reputation for being hard to kill and harder to find. He was also the only person Thaddeus Vale trusted not to sell him out for a quick payout.
Not all of it.
He tapped a line in the ledger.
They divert 12% of the city's ambient mana into private reservoirs, hidden deep underground, reserved for the upper district, for their own use, while the lower wards decay because they're starved of power. Because they want to control it. Power isn't just about casting spells, Silas. It's about leverage. If you control the flow, you control the people. And look at this entry from last week.
He slid the ledger closer. A shipment of refined mana crystals moved out of Sector 4. Destination: the High Magus's private estate. Value: equivalent to 3 years' tribute from this entire district. Silas picked up the page, his fingers trembling slightly.
This is treason. This is everything they deny. It's a conspiracy. Silas dropped the page as if it had burned him. The paper fluttered to the stained wooden table, landing on top of Thaddeus's own notes.
You are walking into a grave, Vale. If the High Magus finds out you have these records. He won't, Thaddeus said. He didn't look up from the ledger. His finger traced another line, highlighting a series of transfers labeled sanitation maintenance, because I made sure no one else knows where to look. But that isn't the point. The point is they are hoarding power while my core fractures. Silas leaned back, the chair screeching against the floorboards. He rubbed his chin, his eyes narrowing. You think you can fix yourself? With what? Starvation and hope? I think I can eat their scraps, Thaddeus corrected. He finally looked up, locking eyes with the rogue mage. And I need a guide, someone who knows where the blind spots in the council's surveillance are. Silas laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You want me to help you break into the highest security vaults in the city? For what? A few crystals? You're mad. I'm desperate, Thaddeus said flatly. And desperation makes for good company. Besides, if I fail, you lose nothing but your time. If I succeed, we both get rich off their greed. Do we have a deal? Silas stared at him for a long moment. The noise of the tea house swirled around them, clinking cups, hushed conversations, the hiss of steam, but in their corner, the air was still. Finally, Silas sighed and pulled his cloak tighter. I know a guy. He deals in donated artifacts from the old library ruins. Unregistered. If anyone asks, he's a ghost. Where? The sunken archives. Midnight tonight. Come alone. And Vale, bring your wits. The council dogs are everywhere. Thaddeus nodded once and slipped a pouch of coins across the table. See you at midnight. The rain in the lower district didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Thaddeus Vale stood beneath the overhang of a dilapidated tenement building, watching the street below. His cloak was soaked through, heavy and cold against his skin. He checked the star pendant at his throat. It was dim now, conserving its energy for what was coming. He had spent the last hour mapping the patrol routes of the council's enforcers. He knew exactly when they would pass, exactly how long the blind spot lasted. 3 minutes. Not a second more. A figure emerged from the shadows of the alleyway across the street. Tall, lean, moving with the silence of a predator. It was Silas, accompanied by a third figure, a hooded individual whose face was obscured by a mask of woven wire. Thaddeus stepped out from under the overhang and crossed the street. He didn't run. Running drew attention. He walked with purpose, his boots splashing in puddles, until he was 10 feet away. Did you bring it? The hooded figure asked. The voice was distorted, metallic. Thaddeus held out a small, unassuming box. Inside was a shard of mana glass he had scavenged from a broken street lamp weeks ago. It was useless to anyone else, but Thaddeus could feel its resonance. The hooded figure inspected it with a gloved hand. Acceptable. Follow us. They led him down into the darkness. The entrance to the sunken archives was hidden behind a false wall in an abandoned sewer junction. Silas kicked the mechanism, and the stone shifted with a groan of rusted hinges. They descended into the damp, dark earth. The air here was thick with residual magic. It tasted like ozone and old blood. Thaddeus felt his core ache in response, a dull throb that reminded him of his own fragility, but he pushed past it. Pain was just data.
Careful, the structure is unstable. And the traps, well, let's just say the previous tenants didn't believe in insurance.
Thaddeus looked around. The room was filled with rows of crumbling shelves, long since stripped bare. But in the center, on a pedestal of black stone, sat a single object, a crystal orb, pulsing with a soft, blue light.
The resonance sphere.
He had read about it in his mentor's journals. To Thaddeus, who could see the flow but not yet touch it, it might be a bridge. Take it, the hooded figure commanded. And leave. We do not stick around for questions. Thaddeus stepped forward. As he reached for the sphere, he felt a shift in the air, a pressure. Not from the object, but from the shadows behind him. You really thought we wouldn't notice you tracking our shipments? The voice was familiar, cold, precise. Thaddeus froze. He didn't turn around immediately. He listened to the sound of breathing, the rustle of fabric, the click of a staff being lifted.
Joran.
Joran stepped into the light of the sphere. Ilara was there too, her wand drawn, pointed directly at Thaddeus's heart. Silas and the hooded figure were gone. The star pendant against Thaddeus's chest hummed with a frantic, jagged heat, its fractured facets pulsing in time with the warning text that scrolled across his vision. The system message was relentless, a digital red error overlaying the gray dawn of his exile. Critical failure imminent. Magical reserve at 0% of survival probability dropping. He pulled the tattered blanket tighter around his shoulders, ignoring the biting cold of the shack that served as his temporary tomb. His hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from the raw, chaotic energy thrumming beneath his skin. It was a terrifying sensation, like holding a live wire without insulation. He focused on the pendant. It was broken, yes, but it was alive. "If I am a mistake," he whispered to the empty room, the words feeling too small for the magnitude of his desperation, "then let me be the exception." The logic was fragile, a paper shield against a storm, but it was all he had. He needed to move. Staying here meant death, or worse, erasure. Thaddeus stepped out into the muddy lane. The village of Oakhaven lay silent, its inhabitants hiding behind heavy doors and shuttered windows. To them he was a pariah, a failed mage who had touched forces he did not understand. But Thaddeus saw the world differently now. The veil of reality was thinning. He noticed patterns in the way the mist curled around the cobblestones, subtle currents of energy that others missed. These were not just weather phenomena. They were resources, raw and untamed, waiting to be tapped. He walked toward the edge of town where the forest began to choke the horizon. His goal was simple: gain confidence. He needed to cast a spell. Any spell. Just one without killing himself in the process, but his body felt weak, drained by previous failures. He needed aid. That was when he saw her. Elena Sorvetti stood by the old stone well at the town's border. She wore a traveler's cloak dusted with the dirt of the road, and her eyes were sharp, scanning the tree line with predatory precision. She did not look like someone who tolerated failures. When she spotted Thaddeus approaching, her hand drifted toward the hilt of the dagger at her hip.
You're far from your shack.
Her voice was crisp, cutting through the damp morning air. Thaddeus stopped 10 paces away, keeping his hands visible but loose. "I'm walking," he replied. His voice was steady, betraying none of the internal panic that screamed at him to run back and hide. "From Exile?" Elena tilted her head, her gaze raking over his patched robes and the faint, erratic glow emanating from his chest.
Most exiles don't walk toward the Deepwood alone, unless they're looking for death. I'm looking for answers.
He forced himself to hold her gaze.
And I have no time for riddles.
Elena stepped down from the well's rim, landing silently on the mud. She closed the distance between them, until she was close enough for him to smell the rain and leather on her clothes. "Answers are expensive." Thaddeus Vale. "Especially for broken things. Then price it," he said. The challenge hung in the air. He could feel the system's warning pulsing against his ribs, a reminder of his fragility. But beneath the pain, there was a spark, a connection. He could see the magical residue clinging to her cloak, faint but potent. She was strong, stronger than him, and he wanted that strength. Elena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a sharp, calculating expression.
You have guts. I'll give you that. Most men in your condition beg for mercy. I'm not most men, are you?
Elena circled him slowly, like a wolf assessing a wounded prey. "You stand there, trembling with power you can't control. You're leaking energy. It's messy, dangerous. She stopped in front of him again, pointing a gloved finger at the pendant.
That trinket is keeping you alive. But it's also marking you. The guild will come for that thing eventually. Let them come.
The words surprised him with their conviction. He realized then that he wasn't just surviving, he was rebinding his foundations. Every step he took, every breath he drew, was an act of defiance. I need training. I can see the currents now. I feel them. But I can't shape them. Elena studied him for a long moment. The silence stretched, heavy and tense. Thaddeus wondered if she would strike him down right there, or laugh him off. Instead, she sighed, a sound of genuine weariness mixed with curiosity.
You see the currents? Yes.
They're everywhere, like veins in the earth. Then you've already started?
She crossed her arms over her chest.
My mentor? He spoke of this. The veil. He said only those who break can see what lies beneath. You are broken, Thaddeus. That is your weakness and your gift.
What do you propose?
He knew the risk. Aligning with a stranger in the wild was suicide, but the alternative was solitary decay. Lelena extended a hand. Her fingers were calloused, scarred from years of combat and spellcraft. I offer aid. Under the guidance of my mentor's teachings, I can teach you to shape them without tearing your soul apart. The promise hung in the damp air, heavy with implication. Thaddeus stared at her extended hand. It was an invitation to walk back into the world of mages, a world that had cast him out like trash. To take it was to admit he still needed their rules, their structure, but to refuse was to let the current drag him under before he could even learn to swim.
I'm not sure I can trust you.
His voice low, he did not reach for her hand yet. The system warning in his periphery flared brighter, a jagged red spike of pain that made him wince. Worn tonguing, spiritual decay accelerating. She did not retract her hand. Her eyes narrowed, scanning his face for any sign of hesitation or deceit. Fear is what keeps you alive right now. Use it, but don't let it paralyze you. Thaddeus looked down at his own hands. They were still trembling, but the tremor was different now. It wasn't just weakness, it was anticipation. The patterns he had seen in the mist, the subtle pull of the magical veins beneath his feet, they were calling to him. Elena was right. He was broken, yes, but a broken vessel could still hold water if the cracks were sealed with the right material. And she offered that material, Thaddeus asked.
Nothing is free, not even in exile.
Elena's smile returned, thin and sharp. He doesn't want gold. He doesn't want favors. He wants results. I tell him I have found a potential anomaly, a variable that defies the standard model of magical decay. If you succeed, if you stabilize, you will be proof of his theories. If you fail. She let the sentence hang, unfinished but clear. Then I lose my credibility with him, and in this line of work, losing credibility gets you killed. This was not just a training session, it was a test, a life or death experiment conducted by a mentor who likely cared more about data than human life. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it sharpened his focus. He had spent years playing games where failure meant restarting a character sheet. Here, failure meant death. But in those games, he had learned to push boundaries, to exploit glitches, to find the impossible path when all others were closed.
If I accept, I do not answer to your mentor's whims directly. I work with you. Only you.
Elena raised an eyebrow. He tapped the broken star pendant against his chest. The metal was hot, burning his skin, but he ignored it. I see the currents. You can feel them, but you cannot see them as clearly as I do. My eyes are open now. Your mentor's theories require an observer who can perceive the raw weave of magic. I am that observer. Without me, you are just another mage hunting ghosts. With me, you have a map. Elena stared at him. Then, slowly, she withdrew her hand. She crossed her arms again, but her posture shifted. The predatory tension relaxed slightly, replaced by something more akin to respect, and possibly arrogant. But not entirely wrong. She stepped back, putting distance between them. My mentor values potential over pride. He will tolerate your arrogance if your results are undeniable. We leave at dusk. Tonight, you rest. If your body collapses before then, you are useless to us both. And I do not waste time on corpses. Thaddeus let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The immediate pressure lifted, though the underlying danger remained.
And where do we go? To the edge of whispers?
Turning toward the tree line,
My mentor's sanctum is hidden there, beyond the veil of the ordinary world.
she glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes glinting in the dim light. Can you follow, Thaddeus? Or do you need a guide? Thaddeus looked at the forest. The patterns were stronger here, weaving through the trees like invisible threads. He could feel them tugging at his senses, inviting him to step closer, to reach out and touch the magic itself. It was dangerous. It was intoxicating, but it was also a path forward.
I don't need a guide. I have the map.
Following in her footsteps. But I might need someone to hold my hand if the current gets too strong. Elena snorted, but there was no mockery in it. Don't get ahead of yourself, Vale. We haven't even begun to rebuild your foundations yet. She started walking into the shadows of the forest. Stay close. If you stray from the path, the veil will swallow you whole, and I am not going in after you to fish you out. Thaddeus picked up the pace, falling into step beside her. The system message flickered in his vision. Critical failure imminent, now accompanied by a new line. Alliance formed. Elena Sorvetti. Training initiated. The text was cold, clinical, but it brought Thaddeus felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was not just a training session, it was a test. A life-or-death experiment conducted by a mentor who likely cared more about data than human life. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it sharpened his focus. He had spent years playing games where failure meant restarting a character sheet. Here, failure meant death. But in those games, he had learned to push boundaries, to exploit glitches, to find the impossible path when all others were closed.
If I accept, I do not answer to your mentor's whims directly. I work with you. Only you.
Elena raised an eyebrow.
You are bargaining? From a position of zero power? I am bargaining because I have something you need.
He tapped the broken star pendant against his chest. The metal was hot, burning his skin, but he ignored it. I see the currents. You can feel them, but you cannot see them as clearly as I do. My eyes are open now. Your mentor's theories require an observer who can perceive the raw weave of magic. I am that observer. Without me, you are just another mage hunting ghosts. With me, you have a map. Elena stared at him. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the dry grass around the well. Then, slowly, she withdrew her hand. She crossed her arms again, but her posture shifted. The predatory tension relaxed slightly, replaced by something more akin to respect. Bold, she said, and possibly arrogant. But not entirely wrong. She stepped back, putting distance between them.
My mentor values potential over pride. He will tolerate your arrogance if your results are undeniable. We leave at dusk. Tonight you rest. If your body collapses before then, you are useless to us both. And I do not waste time on corpses. And where do we go? To the edge of whispers.
Turning toward the tree line,
My mentor's sanctum is hidden there, beyond the veil of the ordinary world.
she glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes glinting in the dim light.
Can you follow Thaddeus, or do you need a guide? I don't need a guide. I have the map.
Following in her footsteps. But I might need someone to hold my hand if the current gets too strong. Lena snorted, but there was no mockery in it. Don't get ahead of yourself, Vale. We haven't even begun to rebuild your foundations yet. She started walking into the shadows of the forest. Stay close. If you stray from the path, the veil will swallow you whole, and I am not going in after you to fish you out. Thaddeus picked up the pace, falling into step beside her. The system message flickered in his vision. Critical failure imminent, now accompanied by a new line. Alliance formed. Elena Sorvetti. Training initiated. The text was cold, clinical, but it brought a strange comfort. He was no longer fighting the current alone.
Your mentor.
Keeping his voice low to match her pace.
What is his name? You haven't mentioned him beyond my mentor?
Elena did not look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the dense thicket ahead, her hand hovering near the hilt of a dagger sheathed at her hip. Names are dangerous things in the Edge. Names have power. My mentor prefers to be known only as the Archivist. The Archivist, Thaddeus repeated. It sounded like a title from a forgotten library, not a person. Does he know I can see the currents? He suspects, Elena corrected. He has studied many who claim to see. Most are liars, or madmen. He requires proof that your sight is not a hallucination induced by spiritual decay. She stopped abruptly, turning to face him. The forest around them was darker now, the canopy thick enough to block out most of the fading sunlight.
How do you intend to provide this proof? You cannot cast spells yet. You are barely holding yourself together. I don't need to cast a fireball.
He focused inward, trying to locate the specific thread of magic that felt closest to him. It was like finding a single hair in a haystack made of smoke. I just need to show you that I can stop the decay. For a moment. Just one moment. Elena crossed her arms.
And how do you plan to do that? You have no mana pool. You have no focus crystal. You have nothing but that broken piece of jewelry and your own stubbornness. It is not just jewelry.
He pulled the pendant from his shirt. It glowed with a faint, erratic pulse. It is a regulator. My mentor made it. It was meant to stabilize the flow of magic through the body. But when I was exiled, it broke. Elena's eyes narrowed. Elena stepped closer, her boots crunching softly on the dry leaves. She did not look at the pendant with pity, but with analytical precision. A regulator, she said quietly.
Crude workmanship for a mentor of his stature. But effective if the wearer has no other control. Effective is all I need right now.
He held the pendant out slightly, letting it catch the remaining twilight. It filters the overflow, keeps my heart from beating too fast to stop. Lena reached out, her fingers hovering inches from the glowing metal. She did not touch it. The light flared brighter where her hand approached, reacting to her presence.
If that regulator fails completely, your body will burn itself out in seconds. You are using a dam to hold back a tsunami with a single crack in the wall. I know the risks.
He pulled the pendant back against his chest. The warmth seeped into his skin, a comforting anchor in the swirling chaos of his mind. That is why I need your mentor. I cannot fix it alone, and I cannot let it break. Elena withdrew her hand, her expression unreadable. Then we must move faster than I anticipated. The Edge is not forgiving to those who hesitate. If you stop, the currents will drag you under before you can even scream. She turned back toward the path, her cloak billowing around her legs. Walk. Thaddeus followed, his heart hammering a rhythm against the cold metal of the pendant. The forest grew denser, the trees twisting into unnatural shapes that seemed to watch them pass. Shadows lengthened, detaching themselves from the trunks and sliding across the ground like oil on water. He kept his eyes on Elena's back, using her steady pace as a reference point against the disorienting pull of the magic around him. Does your mentor have a weakness?
Everyone has a leverage point. Even someone who values potential over pride.
Lelena did not break stride. The Archivist is obsessed with order, with structure. He believes magic is a language that can be fully decoded if only one finds the correct syntax. He dislikes chaos. He despises unpredictability. She glanced back, her eyes sharp in the gloom.
You are the embodiment of chaos, Thaddeus. You are a glitch in his system that makes you dangerous to him and valuable. Valuable enough to kill if I prove too difficult?
Elena stopped again, this time in a small clearing where the trees formed a perfect circle around a dry stone well. She turned to face him fully, her silhouette stark against the darkening sky. He is not a killer, she said. I understand, he said. I don't need a shield. I need a weapon. And you are holding the handle. Elena's lips twitched, almost a smile. See that it fits your hand correctly. She stepped toward the well, placing a hand on the rough stone rim. The entrance is below. My mentor is waiting. Try not to disappoint him before you have even begun. Thaddeus looked at the dark maw of the well. The air rising from it smelled of ozone and old parchment. He adjusted his grip on his own shoulder, feeling the tension in his muscles. this was the point of no return. There was no going back to the shack, no pretending this was a dream or a game.
Lead the way.
The star pendant hung against Thaddeus's chest, a fractured shard of silver and light that pulsed with a rhythm matching his own frantic heartbeat. The air in the cramped shack was thick with the smell of damp wood and old dust, but beneath it lay something sharper ozone and static, the scent of magic bleeding from the cracks in the walls. Thaddeus stared at the broken gem. It glowed brighter than it had moments before, casting long, jagged shadows across his face. His vision swam, not with dizziness but with the terrifying clarity of a system warning etched directly into his consciousness. Imminent failure. Strength critical.
If I am a mistake,
His voice raspy from days of silence.
then let me be the exception.
The words hung in the stagnant air, meaningless yet heavy with intent. He had spent years dreaming of magic in the glow of a screen, never expecting to wake up in this rotting shack with nothing but a broken necklace and a dying body. But the system's warning was not just a notification, it was a lifeline he could not ignore. He needed power, not the vague, theoretical power of a player character, but the visceral, dangerous reality of survival. He closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe. The only thing truly impossible is what we do not believe in. He opened his eyes. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift, coalescing into shapes that were almost familiar. Patterns he had seen in his mentor's teachings flickered at the edge of his perception. Veils of reality, thin and tattered, revealed underlying threads of energy. They hummed in his ears, a low-frequency vibration that made his teeth ache. He reached out, not with his hands, but with his mind, tracing the faintest thread of mana flowing through the rotting floorboards. It was weak, diluted, almost non-existent. But it was there. A heavy boot crunched on gravel outside the shack door, then another. The sound was deliberate, heavy, and entirely unwelcome. Thaddeus froze, his hand hovering over the faint magical current he had just felt. He could feel the presence before the door even opened, a looming, oppressive weight that made the air in the room feel thinner. The door swung open without a knock. Valiant Grimshaw stood in the frame, silhouetted against the harsh sunlight of the clearing outside. He was a mountain of muscle and iron, his armor scarred from battles Thaddeus had only read about in lore books. His eyes, cold and hard as flint, locked onto Thaddeus.
You're still breathing.
The statement was not a question. It was an accusation. Thaddeus slowly lowered his hand, hiding the faint glow that lingered around his fingertips. I prefer to remain so, Grimshaw. Valiant stepped into the shack, filling the small space with his presence. He didn't look at the walls or the ceiling, he looked only at Thaddeus.
You've been spending too much time staring at the floor, looking for something you don't understand. I am looking for understanding.
Keeping his voice steady, despite the terror clawing at his stomach, something you would know nothing about. Valiant's mouth twitched, not in a smile, but in a sneer. Understanding is for scholars. Power is for warriors, and you, Vale, have none. You are a waste of breath, a waste of space. He took another step forward, his hand resting on the hilt of the sword at his hip.
I should have left you to die in the wastes. You had the chance. You failed.
Valiant's eyes narrowed. The air around him began to crackle with raw, unrefined energy. It was chaotic, wild, and dangerous, a stark contrast to the delicate threads Thaddeus sensed.
I didn't fail. I hesitated, and that hesitation is why you're still here, mocking me. I am merely existing, a fact you seem unable to accept. Existence is a privilege.
Valiant growled.
One you have forfeited. Your magic. It's weak, pathetic, but it's growing. I can see it in the way you look at the world now, like a wolf looking at a sheep.
He drew his sword halfway, the steel singing a sharp note. You'll be nothing but dust when I'm through with you. Thaddeus stood up, his legs trembling but his spine straightening. He could feel the mana in the room responding to his fear, pooling around him like water finding its level. It was dangerous. It was unstable. But it was his.
If you kill me, Grimshaw, you prove that strength is all that matters. And I have learned that strength without insight is blind. Insight won't save you.
Pulling the sword fully free, The blade gleamed with a dull red enchantment. Only blood does. He lunged. Thaddeus sidestepped, the sword cleaving through empty air where his throat had been a fraction of a second before. The wind of the strike whipped his hair across his face, but he did not look back. He felt the mana thread he had been tracing snap taut, vibrating with sudden, violent potential.
You miss?
Circling to the left, his legs shook, muscles burning from days of starvation and fear. But he forced them to hold him upright. Your stance is too wide. You rely on momentum you haven't earned. Valiant gritted his teeth, pivoting with surprising speed for a man of his size. The floorboards groaned under his weight,
I earn everything.
swinging the blade in a horizontal arc.
Take that away from me, and I am nothing.
You are already nothing, Thaddeus countered, ducking under the swing. The steel whistled over his head, close enough to cut an ear,
You are just loud.
kicking out with a heavy boot. Thaddeus leaped back, landing awkwardly on one knee. Pain shot up his leg, but he ignored it. He focused inward, into the chaotic storm of energy bleeding from Valiant's armor. It was messy, uncontrolled, like fire without fuel. Thaddeus could see the gaps in it, the places where the magic was thin and brittle. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't need one. He needed only to touch the thread he had found earlier, the one running along the base of the shack's northern wall. It was faint, almost invisible, but it was there. Valiant raised the sword high, preparing for a downward strike that would likely split Thaddeus in two.
I know exactly who I'm killing. Then kill me, if you can reach me.
Valiant brought the sword down. Thaddeus didn't dodge. He stepped into the swing, sliding between Valiant's arms and the falling steel. The heat of the enchantment singed his tunic, but he was close now, closer than he had ever been to raw magic without a focus, or a guide. He could feel it itching at his fingertips, desperate to be used.
See?
His voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Valiant stumbled, off balance, trying to recover from the miss. He turned, fury contorting his features. He swung wildly, a backhand blow aimed at Thaddeus's head. Thaddeus ducked, grabbing Valiant's wrist with both hands. The impact jarred his bones, nearly dislocating his shoulders, but he held on. He could feel the mana leaking from Valiant's gauntlet, spilling into the air like steam. It was intoxicating. Let go, Valiant snarled, trying to wrench his arm free. His strength was immense, a tangle of muscle and iron, but Thaddeus had something Valiant lacked. He had intent.
I can't.
He closed his eyes for a split second, reaching out with his mind instead of his body. He grabbed the thin thread of mana he had sensed earlier, the one running through the wall. It resisted, weak and stubborn, but Thaddeus poured his own desperation into it. The only thing truly impossible is what we do not believe in. He pulled. A spark jumped from the wall to his fingertips. It was small, barely a flicker, but it connected to the chaotic energy leaking from Valiant. For a moment, Thaddeus felt the connection hum. He understood briefly how to channel it, how to twist it. He opened his eyes and twisted his wrist. The spark flared, not attacking Valiant, but disrupting the flow of mana in Valiant's own arm. It was a simple disruption, a tiny knot tied in a tangled rope, but it was enough. Valiant's grip faltered. The sword slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. Valiant stared at his empty hand, then at Thaddeus. His chest heaved.
What did you do? I showed you.
Stepping back and letting go of Valiant's wrist, he rubbed his stinging hands, feeling a faint warmth that hadn't been there before. It wasn't power, not yet. It was just proof. Valiant straightened up, ignoring the sword on the floor. He looked at Thaddeus with new eyes. The hatred was still there, but beneath it was something else. Fear.
You're getting stronger. Learning gets you killed.
He kicked the sword away, out of reach.
Eventually your precision will fail, and when it does, I will be there to finish it.
He looked at his hands. They were trembling again, but this time it was not from fear. It was from the aftershock of magic. Thaddeus asked, stepping back just as Valiant's gauntleted fist smashed into the rotting wood of the table. Splinters flew into the air, catching the dim light from the pendant. Valiant panted, his chest heaving. He spun around, eyes wide with rage. I don't need a crutch. I need to break you. He didn't move. He watched the mana patterns shift around Valiant's body, chaotic and jagged. It was overwhelming, but he could see the fractures in the flow. Valiant roared. He lunged, his movements faster than before, fueled by pure adrenaline. His fist aimed for Thaddeus's jaw. Thaddeus sidestepped, the air whistling past his ear. He felt a spike of fear, sharp and cold, but he forced it down. Shut up. Valiant swung a backhand, catching Thaddeus in the ribs. The impact threw him against the wall. Pain exploded in his side, stealing his breath. He slid down the wood, landing hard on the floorboards. Valiant stood over him, breathing heavily. Stay down, Vale. No, Thaddeus gasped. He pushed himself up, wincing. His vision swam for a moment, then cleared. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, but he could still feel the threads. The one from the wall was stronger now, connected to him. You can't kill me if I don't stay down. Valiant sneered. We'll see about that. He raised a foot, preparing to stomp on Thaddeus's hand. Thaddeus grabbed the thread again. It was faint, but it was there. He pulled, not on Valiant, but on the mana in the air around him. A spark jumped from the wall to his fingers. It was small, barely a flicker, but it connected to the chaotic energy leaking from Valiant's stance.
Look.
Twisting his wrist, the spark flared, disrupting the flow of mana in Valiant's leg. Valiant stumbled, his footing giving way. He fell forward, crashing into Thaddeus. They rolled across the floor, grappling in the dust. Valiant was stronger, but Thaddeus had precision. He twisted, breaking Valiant's grip, and kicked him away. Valiant scrambled back, getting to his feet. What are you? Valiant demanded, backing up against the door.
What trick is this? No trick.
Standing slowly, his ribs screamed in protest, but he ignored it. Just understanding. Understanding is for the weak, Valiant spat. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a small, jagged stone. It pulsed with a dark, violet light. Let's see how you handle real magic. Thaddeus narrowed his eyes.
Where did you get that? It doesn't matter.
He crushed the stone in his hand. Violet fire erupted from his palm, swirling into a sphere of destruction. What matters is that it ends now. He threw the sphere. Thaddeus didn't dodge. He raised his hand, grabbing the thread he had found earlier. It was thin, brittle, but it was there. He pulled, channeling the mana from the wall through his body.
Stop.
The violet fire hit an invisible barrier inches from Thaddeus's face. It sputtered, then collapsed into ash. Valiant stared at his empty hand, horrified.
How? You don't control it.
His voice steady.
It controls you, and I just cut the leash.
Valiant staggered back, clutching his hand.
You stole my magic? No, I took away your dependence on it.
He looked at his own hands. They were glowing faintly, a soft blue light that hadn't been there before. It was unstable, dangerous, but it was his. And now I know what I am capable of. Valiant's eyes widened in fear. He turned and ran out the door, disappearing into the night. Thaddeus stood alone in the silence. He looked at his hands again. The glow faded, leaving only a faint warmth. He had survived, and for the first time he believed he could win. The silence that followed Valiant's retreat was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating. Thaddeus leaned against the broken wall, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The faint blue glow on his fingertips had faded, leaving behind a sensation of hollow exhaustion. He looked down at his hands. They were trembling uncontrollably now, the adrenaline crash hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He needed to move. If Valiant returned with more than just fists and stolen magic, Thaddeus was dead. But more importantly, he needed to understand what had just happened. The system message that had flashed in his mind earlier, warning, mana resonance critical, was still lingering at the edge of his consciousness, a digital ghost haunting his reality. He crawled toward the corner where his meager possessions were piled. Among the scraps of cloth and half-eaten rations lay the star pendant. The glass casing was shattered, the silver frame bent out of shape, but the core within was intact. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, synchronized with the beating of Thaddeus's heart. "Why me?" he whispered to the empty room. The question hung in the air, unanswered. He knew there were forces at play here, ancient and indifferent, but he also knew that survival required answers, and answers required resources. He reached out, his trembling fingers brushing the cold metal of the pendant. A sharp jolt ran up his arm, not painful, but startlingly clear. For a second, the world around him shifted. The walls of the shack seemed to dissolve into layers of translucent light. He saw the grain of the wood not as fiber, but as a network of veins. He saw the air not as empty space, but as a dense medium, thick with drifting motes of energy. Thaddeus gasped and pulled his hand back. The vision snapped shut. He was alone in the dark again, but the feeling remained. The world had changed, or perhaps his perception of it had finally adjusted to the truth. There was a knock at the door. It wasn't Valiant's pounding fist, it was polite, precise, and utterly out of place in this squalor. Thaddeus froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. Who could be here? The exiles who had thrown him out? Or something else entirely? "Open up, Vale," a voice called from the other side. It was smooth, cultured, and laced with an amusement that made Thaddeus's skin crawl. "I know you're in there. I can smell the ozone." Thaddeus scrambled to his feet, grabbing the pendant and shoving it into his tunic. He moved to the door, hand hovering over the latch. "Who is it?" "Someone who appreciates talent," the voice replied, "and someone who knows you're not as alone as you think." Thaddeus hesitated. Opening the door was a risk, closing it might mean death. But staying inside meant waiting for Valiant to return with an army. He turned the latch and pulled the door open just a crack. A woman stood there. She wore robes of deep indigo, embroidered with silver threads that seemed to move on their own. Her face was pale, her eyes sharp and intelligent. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thaddeus Vale," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation.
I am Ilara Vance, and you have just made a very dangerous noise in a very quiet world. I don't know who you are.
His voice steady despite the terror gripping his gut.
You do now.
She walked to the center of the room, looking around with mild disgust.
And Valiant Grimshaw is not your only problem. He acts out of jealousy because he senses what you are becoming. But I sense it too, and that makes me interested. Interested in what?
He kept his hand near the pendant.
What are you talking about? The power you just tapped into.
She turned to face him, her gaze piercing.
You didn't just block Valiant's spell. You rewrote the local mana density. That is not a beginner's trick. That is the work of a master.
"I didn't do it on purpose," Thaddeus lied. He had done it on purpose, even if he hadn't fully understood how. It was instinct. "Instinct is just knowledge buried deep," Ilara countered. She stepped closer, invading his personal space. "You are a mistake in this world's design, Thaddeus. A glitch, and glitches can be corrected, or they can be weaponized." Thaddeus narrowed his eyes.
What do you want? To offer you a choice.
She extended a hand. In her palm lay a small, black crystal. It absorbed the light from the pendant, making it look like a hole in reality. "Join me, and I will teach you to control this glitch. Or stay here, and let Valiant grind you into dust when he realizes what you're capable of." Thaddeus looked at the crystal, then at Ilara's hand. He thought of Valiant's rage, of the sword clattering to the floor, of the violet fire collapsing into ash. He thought of his own hands, glowing with a power that felt both alien and familiar.
If I join you,
What happens to my autonomy? You gain purpose, and strength, and protection, and if I refuse, then you are on your...
Ilara tilted her head. "Then you are already dead." She closed her fingers over the crystal. "I gave you time." Thaddeus stepped back. The distance felt like a shield. "I don't take charity from monsters, Ilara." He pointed at the door. "Leave." She laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound.
you think you have a choice? Valiant will return with fire and hate. You need an anchor. I am that anchor. I have my own.
He touched the pendant beneath his tunic. The warmth pulsed against his skin, steady and real. And it is enough. Ilara's smile vanished. Her eyes hardened into flint. Stubbornness is a fatal flaw, Vale, but I admire the spirit. She turned toward the exit. Valiant comes at dawn. Bring your hope. It will burn brightly before it dies. She stepped out into the night. The door remained open. Thaddeus watched her silhouette vanish into the shadows. He waited 10 seconds. 20. Nothing moved. He pulled the door shut and threw the bolt. His hands were still shaking, but his mind was clear. Valiant wanted supremacy. He wanted to prove he was the strongest. Thaddeus knew now that strength wasn't just force, it was control, and he had found a new resource in the walls, in the air, in the space between breaths. He was not alone, he was not helpless. He was awake. The air inside the cramped shack was thick with the scent of damp earth and old rot, a smell that had become as familiar to Thaddeus Vale as his own heartbeat. He sat on the edge of his narrow cot, the wooden slats digging into his thighs, staring at the object resting in his palm. The star pendant, once the cherished gift from his mentor, now lay fractured. It glowed not with warmth, but with a cold, hungry luminescence that seemed to drain the color from the room around it. A system message hovered in his vision, translucent and sharp against the gloom. Imminent failure due to weak state. The words burned into his mind like acid. He clenched his fist, trying to crush the pendant, but the light only intensified, searing his skin without leaving a mark.
You look at it like it owes you money.
The rival mage leaned against the frame, arms crossed over his chest, a smirk playing on his lips. He wore fine robes of deep violet, untouched by the grime that coated Thaddeus's clothes. Thaddeus looked up, his eyes narrowing.
It's broken, Kale. Just like my chances. Broken is just another word for available.
Pushing off the doorframe and stepping into the room. His boots made no sound on the rotting floorboards. He circled Thaddeus with the predatory grace of a cat.
You think exile changes anything? The Council doesn't care about your feelings, Thaddeus. They care about results. And right now, you're producing nothing but failure. I'm surviving.
His voice steady despite the tremor in his hands.
That's more than most people in my position can say.
Kale stopped directly in front of him, looking down with pity that was worse than hatred. He reached out, tapping the glowing pendant in Thaddeus's palm. The light flared violently, and Kale hissed, pulling his hand back as if burned.
Maybe I should let it.
Looking back at the pendant, the light was rhythmic now, pulsing in time with his own breath. He felt a strange pull, a whisper in the back of his mind that sounded less like words and more like instinct. If I am a mistake, then let me be the exception.
Live or die, you're still pathetic.
Regaining his composure.
But there's a reason the Council didn't just execute you. They need someone to clean up the mess in the northern wastes. Someone expendable, that's you.
I'm not going to the wastes.
Standing up. The movement was sudden, and Kale took a half step back, surprised by the shift in posture.
Why? Too scared of what might be out there.
A harsh, barking sound.
Or too scared of what you might become. You've always been afraid to touch the dark side of magic, Thaddeus. Always played it safe with your light spells and your healing wards. Now the door is open, and you're trembling like a leaf.
They were shaking from anticipation. The pendant's light was growing brighter, casting long, jagged shadows against the peeling walls of the shack. Calculating, Kale stepped closer again, his eyes gleaming with malice. What are you calculating? How fast you're going to die? Because that's the only metric that matters now. He looked up, meeting Kale's gaze for the first time since the rival entered. There was no plea in his eyes, no begging for mercy, only a cold, hard resolve. You talk about shaping reality, Kale, but you don't see it. You only see what fits your definition of power. You see the light and call it safe. You see the dark and call it evil. Neither is true. They are just forces. Cast a spell. Any spell. Show me you're not just a hollow shell waiting to collapse. The pendant was burning now, the light no longer just visual but tactile, a pressure against his palm that felt like gravity. He could feel the threads of magic in the air, frayed and chaotic, swirling around him like smoke. He had spent his life dreaming of this, studying it from afar while others played at war. Now the dream was waking up, and it was hungry.
The only thing truly impossible is what we do not believe in. Philosophical now? How quaint. Do your worst.
Thaddeus closed his fingers around the pendant. The glass bit into his flesh, drawing blood that sizzled as it met the dark energy.
Then watch.
His voice low and steady, he did not pull his hand away from the pendant. He pressed harder, forcing the jagged edge to bite deeper into his palm. The pain was sharp, a grounding wire for the storm raging in his chest. You think magic is about command? About shouting orders at the universe until it obeys? That's why you're hollow, Kale. You try to force the world to bend because you're too afraid to let it shape you. Kale sneered, shifting his weight from one leg to the other. The smirk had vanished, replaced by a look of thinly veiled unease.
You're bleeding on the floorboards. Aesthetic failure. Go ahead. Cast your little trick. If you don't explode first, I'll laugh. I'm not casting.
He tilted his head, listening to the hum of the pendant. It was no longer just a light. It was a voice, or rather, a frequency, a vibration that resonated with the cracks in the wall, the dust in the air, the blood in his veins.
I'm listening, listening.
Though it lacked its earlier confidence.
To what? The sound of your own irrelevance?
To the gap, Thaddeus corrected. He looked up, his eyes reflecting the sickly violet glow of the gem, between the thought and the action, the space where reality is undecided. You try to bridge it with will? I'm going to step into it. Step into what? A mental breakdown? K1 took a step forward, reaching out as if to grab Thaddeus by the shoulders. Stop this nonsense before you hurt yourself further. Thaddeus didn't flinch. He held his ground, the pendant's light intensifying until it was blinding, washing out Kale's features in a wash of cold white. You're standing in the gap, Kale. You just can't feel it because your heart is too full of yourself to notice the silence around you. Silence? Kale's hand hovered inches from Thaddeus's shoulder, trembling slightly.
There's no silence. There's only noise. Your noise. My noise. The council's noise. Get out of my face with this mystical nonsense. There is no noise, only potential.
He opened his eyes. They were no longer brown. They were pools of absolute black, rimmed with the same erratic gray light as the pendant. He didn't chant. He didn't gesture. He simply acknowledged the danger that had been whispering in his mind since he woke up. The darkness wasn't an enemy to be fought. It was a resource to be tapped. It was the foundation he had been missing, the structural integrity his previous spells lacked. Kale withdrew his hand, taking a sharp step back.
What are you doing? Accepting.
The word hung in the air, heavy and final. He released his grip on the pendant, but did not let go of the energy. Instead, he pulled it in. The light didn't fade, it inverted. The white glow turned into a vortex of shadow that spiraled up his arm, wrapping around his bicep like a second skin. The air in the shack dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Frost formed on the windows, intricate and sharp, spiderwebbing across the glass. Kale scrambled for the door, his boots slipping on the ice spreading from Thaddeus's feet.
You're unstable. You'll kill us both, then stay.
He raised his hand. The shadows coalesced into a thin, whip-like cord of pure void. It cracked through the air, not with sound, but with a sudden vacuum that sucked the breath out of the room. But know this, I am not breaking. I am becoming. Kale froze, his hand on the door latch. The cold was biting now, numbing his fingers. He looked at Thaddeus, really looked at him, and saw no recognition in those black-rimmed eyes, no humanity, only a vast, terrifying clarity.
You're insane. You're actually insane. Is that so bad?
Thaddeus asked. The shadow cord lashed out, not at Kale, but at the wall behind him. It passed through the wood as if it were smoke, leaving a perfectly clean, charred outline. I was mad before. I was afraid. Now? Now I see? See what? Kale's voice cracked. He turned to leave, desperate to put distance between himself and the thing that had been his rival moments ago.
What is there to see? The dark doesn't hate you.
The shadow receded into his arm, sinking beneath his skin until he looked normal again, save for the faint purple vein pulsing along his forearm. It just waits, and I am no longer afraid to wait with it. Kale yanked the door open and fled into the night, leaving the shack door swinging in the wind. Thaddeus didn't watch him go. He looked down at his hand. The blood from the pendant had stopped flowing, sealed by a layer of dark energy that felt warm, almost comforting. He flexed his fingers. The power was there, raw and terrifying, but it was his. He picked up the broken pendant from the floor. It was dark now, inert, but he could still feel the pull, the hunger satisfied for this moment, ready to return. He slipped the chain into his. The power was there, raw and terrifying, but it was his. He picked up the broken pendant from the floor. It was dark now, inert. He slipped the chain into his pocket, the weight of the jagged glass pressing against his thigh like a second heartbeat. The silence in the shack was no longer empty. It was heavy, thick with the residue of what had just happened. He needed to understand it, not just feel it, but map it.
Enough.
His voice sounded foreign, deeper than before.
We need ground truth.
He walked to the small, warped mirror hanging above the single sink. The glass was cracked, splitting his reflection into disjointed fragments. He stared at himself. The black in his eyes had faded, returning to their original brown, but the aura around him remained visible to his new sight. A halo, a violet static clinging to his skin. "You look like a corpse," a voice said from the corner. A very angry, very dead corpse. Thaddeus turned slowly. The stray cat he had fed scraps from during the first week of exile sat on the rotting table, tail twitching. It hadn't fled with Kale. It watched him with yellow eyes that seemed to hold a judgment older than its own life.
Are you going to comment on my appearance, or are you going to tell me why your fur is standing on end?
The cat yawned, stretching its front paws across the table.
Your aura tastes like burnt ozone and regret. It's giving me indigestion. I can taste it too.
He reached out, touching the wall beside him. The wood groaned under his fingertips, not from pressure, but from a subtle vibration. It's resonating with the ley lines beneath us. Kale was wrong. It isn't dangerous because it's evil. It's dangerous because it's real. Real pain is dangerous, the cat corrected, hopping down to the floor. It padded toward the door, stopping just short of the threshold where Kale had fled.
You're playing with fire, little mage. Fire burns. Dark magic burns you first. I've already burned.
He looked at his palm, where the skin was still marked by the pendant's cut. The wound had closed, leaving a scar that pulsed in time with his heart. The pain is gone. What remains is clarity. Clarity is just another word for madness when you're alone, the cat said. It rubbed against Thaddeus's leg, its fur electrically charged. So? What now? Do you plan to stand here until the sun comes up and exposes your secret? The council doesn't sleep. They don't forgive, and they certainly don't forget. Thaddeus frowned. The cat was right about one thing. Exposure was a risk he couldn't afford. But more importantly, the connection he had forged wasn't just personal. It was structural. He could feel the grid of magical energy beneath the shack, the same grid that powered the city above, the same grid the council claimed to control.
If I stay, they'll come. If I leave, I'm blind. Then go into the dark.
It sat down, wrapping its tail around its paws. The shadows between the stones hold more truth than the light on the streets. If you're truly becoming what you say, you'll find your way. Or you won't. Thaddeus walked to the door. The cold air from outside hit his face, but for the first time, he didn't shiver. He stepped out into the alleyway behind the shack. The moon was obscured by clouds, leaving the world in shades of gray and black. But Thaddeus saw more than gray. He saw the veins of power running through the cobblestones, thick and sluggish where they were neglected, thin and sharp where they were over-harvested by the city's mages. He closed his eyes and reached out with his mind, not to cast a spell, but to listen. The darkness whispered back. It didn't offer words. It offered locations, coordinates, a path.
There.
Opening his eyes, He pointed toward the old drainage culvert 3 blocks east, where the shadows pooled thickest. Something is wrong there. Something is bleeding. Bleeding? The cat's ears flattened.
You mean leaking magic? That's usually a good way to get yourself arrested by the wardens. I mean, something is waking up.
He took a step forward, his body moving with a fluid grace that felt alien yet natural. And I need to know what it is. Then you're insane, the cat said. It turned and disappeared into the shadows of the shack. But at least you'll be interesting when you die. Thaddeus ignored the parting shot. He began to walk, not toward the main road, but along the rooftops, moving with a stealth that surprised even him. With every step, he felt the dark energy in his veins aligning with the ambient magic of the city. It wasn't overpowering, it was harmonizing. He reached the edge of the roof overlooking the culvert. Below, the darkness wasn't empty, it was thick. It churned like oil in water, drawing his gaze with a gravitational pull that made his stomach turn. He didn't hesitate. He dropped. He landed in a crouch beside the fissure, the impact muffled by the unnatural softness of the air. The heat radiating from the crack was intense, smelling of sulfur and old blood.
What is this?
His voice was steady, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The anchor, a voice rasped from the shadows within the hole. You found it. Thaddeus peered down. 2 eyes, yellow and slit-pupilled, blinked back at him from the gloom. A figure crouched there, wrapped in tattered robes that seemed to absorb the dim light. Who are you? Thaddeus demanded. He kept his hand ready, fingers twitching with the instinct to lash out with the shadow cord. I am the keeper of what was lost, the figure replied. And you are the key. Thaddeus frowned. I don't understand. You do, the figure said. You feel it, don't you? The hunger. The power waiting to be unleashed. Thaddeus nodded slowly. Yes, then take it, the figure urged. It is yours by right of survival. Thaddeus looked at the pulsing energy. It was dangerous, unstable, but it was his.
I accept.
The darkness surged upward, engulfing him.